Marcus Johnson stood frozen in the packed courtroom, sweat beading on his dark skin as Judge Walter Crane smirked from the bench. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the all-white jury filed in, their eyes never meeting Devon's. Marcus tugged at the collar of his thrift store suit, 3 sizes too big, hanging from his skinny frame like clothes on a scarecrow. Devon Johnson sat at the defendant's table, shoulders slumped, his once bright eyes now dull with resignation. Marcus's older brother, his hero, his protector, looked already defeated before the verdict was even read. On the charge of armed robbery, we find the defendant, Devon Johnson, guilty. The word slammed into Marcus like a physical blow. His mother gasped beside him, stifling a sob. His father's fingers dug into the bench until his knuckles went white. Judge Crane's smile widened, a predator satisfied with his kill. Devon Johnson, he drawled, savoring each syllable. This court sentences you to 15 years in the state penitentiary. He leaned forward, eyes glinting with malice. Perhaps your family should have spent less money on those fancy sneakers you kids love so much and more on a decent lawyer. The gallery tittered, a ripple of amusement that burned Marcus's ears. The public defender, a balding man who'd met Devon exactly twice before trial, stared at his notes, saying nothing as another black man's life was discarded. Judge Crane's gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Case closed. Then came the laugh, a booming, self-satisfied sound that echoed through the courtroom, mocking the brothers, mocking justice itself. That laugh carved itself into Marcus's memory, etching deeper than any physical wound. None of them knew. None of them saw. None of them knew that while other kids played basketball or video games, Marcus Johnson had spent the last 2 years devouring legal textbooks at the public library. None of them knew he could recite entire passages from constitutional law, principles, and policies, or that he'd memorized every landmark Supreme Court decision since Brown versus Board of Education. None of them saw the fire igniting behind his eyes as Judge Crane's laugh hung in the air. That laugh would haunt him forever. That laugh would be Crane's biggest mistake. Marcus couldn't sleep that night, the echo of Crane's mockery rattling in his skull like a loose bullet. The alarm clock glowed at 3:17 a.m., its red numbers casting a bloody tint across the cramped bedroom he'd shared with Devon since childhood. The twin bed across from his stood stripped bare, its emptiness a void that sucked the air from the room. Devon, hard-working, gentle Devon, who'd never hurt anyone, was gone, shipped to Eastridge Prison. For a convenience store robbery he didn't commit, all because he was black, poor, and in the wrong place at the wrong time, coming home from his night shift at Wilson's Auto when police cruisers surrounded him 6 blocks from the crime scene. Fit the description, they'd said. The description. Black male, average height. That was it. That was enough. On the wall hung the thrift store suit, wrinkled and too large, a silent witness to today's defeat. I won't let it end like this, he whispered to the darkness. By dawn, he sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee and Devon's case files spread before him. He'd swiped them from the public defender's office last week when the overworked lawyer stepped out for lunch. The papers were a mess, coffee-stained and dog-eared, but Marcus's photographic memory sliced through the chaos. His mother shuffled in, eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Baby, what are you doing so early?" Reading Devon's case files, she sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. "The lawyer said an appeal would cost more than we make in a year. We don't need their lawyers, Mama. I'm going to bring Devon home." As soon as she left for work, he dived deeper into the case. The witness statements didn't match. The store owner initially described the robber as 5'8" with a scar on his left cheek. Devin was 6'2" with clear skin. The timestamps on the police report showed officers stopped Devin at 9:22 p.m., but the robbery happened at 9:17 p.m., 3 miles away. The convenience store camera had malfunctioned during the exact time of the robbery. The only 20 minutes it failed in 3 years of operation. And the court-appointed defender had barely spoken during the trial, raising only 2 objections. In 4 days of testimony, Marcus flipped to the transcript, where Crane had rushed the jury to deliberation. "This case is open and shut," the judge had declared. "Don't waste the taxpayers' money thinking too hard." Marcus's jaw tightened. Section 34.2 of the state legal code gave him 30 days to file an appeal. He was on day 1. The courthouse loomed like a fortress, its gray stone stained with decades of pollution and prejudice. Inside, the air smelled of floor polish and privilege. Marcus approached the clerk's desk, heart hammering but stride determined. The clerk, a middle-aged white woman with pinched lips and a nameplate reading Mrs. Harmon, looked up, eyes narrowing as she took in his appearance. "Can I help you?" Her tone suggested the opposite. "I'm filing an appeal," Marcus said, sliding the envelope forward. "Devin Johnson, case number 47293. Mrs. Harmon snorted, pushing the envelope back without opening it. "Appeals need to be filed by a licensed attorney, not some kid. Get your parents to hire a real lawyer." Marcus stood his ground. State Code Section 34.2 allows family members to file appeals. I've cited precedent cases on page 3. Mrs. Harmon's nostrils flared. "Listen, boy." "My name is Marcus Johnson," he interrupted, voice level but firm. "And I'd like to speak to your supervisor if you're refusing to accept my filing. That would constitute a violation of access to court's provisions under State Code Section 12.4. Mrs. Harmon's cheeks flushed crimson. She snatched the envelope, her acrylic nails puncturing the paper as she shoved it into a drawer. "Fine. Don't expect anything to come of it. Judge Crane hasn't overturned a conviction in 15 years. Marcus was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him cold. "Judge Crane wants to see you. Now." Judge Crane's chambers smelled of leather and cigars, wealth and power steeped into every surface. The room was larger than the Johnson family's entire apartment, with oak-paneled walls lined with leather-bound law books and framed Ivy League diplomas. The man himself sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, his black robe draped over the back of his chair. In shirt sleeves he looked smaller but no less dangerous, a coiled snake ready to strike. He didn't invite Marcus to sit. "Marcus Johnson," Crane drawled, examining the appeal he'd somehow already obtained. "You wrote this yourself?" Marcus nodded, standing straight despite the fear coiling in his gut. "Yes, Your Honor." "Pretty impressive for a high school dropout." "I didn't drop out. I'm in advanced placement classes. Top of my year." Crane's eyebrows rose slightly. "And yet you think you know more than me about the law. A 17-year-old. From the East Side Projects? I know my brother is innocent." Marcus pointed to the appeal. "The prosecution's key witness changed his story 3 times. That violates Section 18.7 of—" "Don't quote the law to me, boy." Crane slammed his fist on the desk, the sudden violence making Marcus flinch. "I've been a judge for 23 years. I eat, sleep, and breathe the law while you're busy tagging buildings and stealing cars." Marcus kept his voice level. "I've never been arrested, Your Honor. I have a 4.0 GPA and early acceptance letters from 3 colleges. Crane laughed. "That same cruel laugh from the courtroom. Sure you do. Look, I'm going to do you a favor. Drop this appeal nonsense. Your brother's guilty, and this little stunt could land you in trouble too. Is that a threat, Your Honor? It's advice. Don't throw your life away on a lost cause. Marcus met the judge's gaze. My brother's life isn't a lost cause, and neither is justice. I'll see your appeal in my courtroom tomorrow. 9 a.m. sharp. Hope you're ready for disappointment, counselor. Word spread fast through the black community. By the next morning, the courtroom was packed. Teachers from Marcus's high school, neighbors, church members, all there to witness David facing Goliath. Marcus walked in wearing the same thrift store suit, now paired with his father's blue tie. The shoulders still hung too wide. The pants still needed a belt cinched tight. But today the suit carried a different energy. It wasn't a hand-me-down anymore. It was armor. Judge Crane swept in, robes billowing. His face tightened when he saw the crowd, clearly not expecting an audience for what he'd assumed would be a quick dismissal. Order in my courtroom, he barked, voice sharp with surprise. This is not a public spectacle. Mr. Johnson, you may present your arguments, though I warn you that overturning a jury's verdict requires extraordinary evidence. Marcus approached the podium, adjusting the microphone to his height. Then he remembered Crane's laugh, and steel replaced the fear in his spine. Your Honor, I'm here to present evidence that my brother Devin Johnson was wrongfully convicted. Make it quick, Crane snapped. I have a golf game at noon. The gallery murmured with disapproval, and Crane's face darkened. One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom. Marcus began methodically, voice growing stronger with each point. First, the prosecution's witness, Mr. Blake, initially reported the robber was 5'8", with a facial scar. As the court record shows, Devin is 6'2", with no scars. This discrepancy was never addressed at trial. He pulled out a copy of the original police report. Second, the time card from Devin's job at Wilson's Auto places him across town during the robbery. According to his supervisor, Michael Wilson, Devin clocked out at 9:19 p.m. The robbery occurred at 9:17 p.m., 3 miles away. Third, the arresting officer's own report states they stopped Devin at 9:22 p.m., just 3 minutes after he clocked out. Google Maps estimates the walking time from Wilson's Auto to the arrest location as approximately 4 minutes, meaning Devin would have had to run from work directly into police custody after supposedly committing a robbery 3 miles in the opposite direction. This is absurd, Crane interrupted, shifting uncomfortably. A few time discrepancies don't overturn a jury verdict. It's more than discrepancies, Your Honor. It's reasonable doubt, which Section 17.3 establishes as grounds for. Don't lecture me about reasonable doubt. Crane's face flushed red. The jury heard the evidence and made their decision. Furthermore, the convenience store's security camera mysteriously malfunctioned during the exact 20 minutes surrounding the robbery, the only failure in 3 years of operation, according to the store's maintenance records. Then Marcus pulled out his final piece of evidence, a thumb drive. Finally, Your Honor, I have security footage from the bus stop outside Wilson's Auto showing Devin clocking out at 9:19 p.m. and waiting for the bus until police arrested him. At 9:22 p.m., exactly when the robbery was taking place 3 miles away. The courtroom went completely silent. Judge Crane stared at the thumb drive as if it were a venomous snake. Where did you get that footage? It wasn't presented at trial. Because it was never requested by the defense or the prosecution, Marcus replied. Wilson's Auto has external security cameras covering their parking lot and the bus stop. When I visited Mr. Wilson yesterday and explained the situation, he immediately provided the footage. The reporter in the back was now standing, phone raised to capture every word. Several spectators had phones out as well, recording despite. The court rules against electronic devices. Marcus connected the drive to the courtroom's AV system. The grainy footage clearly showed Devin in his work uniform, punching his time card and waiting at the bus stop. The timestamp read 9:19 p.m. 3 minutes later, police cruisers surrounded him, throwing him against the bus shelter as he raised his hands in confusion. Judge Crane's face contorted with rage. This could be doctored. Timestamp manipulation is common in cases like this. The footage is verified by Wilson's auto security system, Marcus countered. I've included the verification certificate as Exhibit C, along with an affidavit from Mr. Wilson confirming its authenticity. More murmurs swept the courtroom. A woman in the third row stood up. Your Honor, I'm Dr. Eleanor Richards, digital forensics expert at State University. I'd be happy to authenticate that footage right now if the court allows. Crane looked like he might explode. Sit down. This is not an open forum. Your Honor, Marcus said, voice ringing with quiet authority. Based on this evidence, I move to have my brother's conviction overturned under State Code Section 42.1, which provides relief when new evidence creates a reasonable doubt that did not otherwise exist. You can't make motions. You're not a lawyer, Crane shouted, losing the last shreds of his judicial composure. Actually, Your Honor, came a new voice from the back. A tall black woman in an impeccable suit strode forward, briefcase in hand. I'm Alyssa Washington from the State Bar Association's Innocence Project. We've been monitoring this case since receiving an email from Marcus last night, and I'm officially joining as counsel for Devin Johnson. Crane's face went from red to pale. Washington was known for bringing down corrupt judges and prosecutors. Furthermore, she continued, I've filed ethics complaints regarding the handling of this case, including the suppression of exculpatory evidence, ineffective assistance of counsel, and judicial misconduct. The room erupted. Judge Crane banged his gavel repeatedly, but the tide had turned. In the chaos, Marcus caught the judge's eye and held it. No more laughing now. Marcus sat in a small conference room, surrounded by a team from the Innocence Project. Alyssa Washington paced in front of a whiteboard covered with timelines and notes. Judge Crane has recused himself from the case, she announced. Claims it's to avoid any appearance of impropriety, but we all know it's because he's running scared. What happens now? Marcus asked. The State Supreme Court has assigned Judge Rodriguez to review the appeal. She's fair, thorough, and doesn't play games. Alyssa smiled at Marcus. You did something remarkable, you know. Most first-year law students couldn't have crafted an appeal that solid. Well, your fight is just beginning. Crane has powerful friends. The prosecutor's office is already claiming they had no knowledge of the bus stop footage, blaming everything on the public defender. After looking deeper into Judge Crane's records, we've found a pattern. In the last 5 years, he's sentenced 126 black men to maximum terms for first-time nonviolent offenses. The average for white defendants in his court, probation or minimal jail time. Marcus wasn't surprised, but hearing the numbers still made his stomach twist. So Devin wasn't just unlucky. He was targeted, and he wasn't the only one. We're looking at potentially dozens of cases that could be overturned. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have listened when I told you to drop it. Some lessons have to be taught the hard way. Marcus stared at the screen, a chill crawling up his spine. Everything okay? Alyssa asked. He hesitated, then showed her the message. Her face hardened. Crane. Has to be. She took out her own phone, snapping a picture of the message. This is witness intimidation, another charge to add to his growing list. A new text appeared. Your mother's car should have better brakes. Tragic accident waiting to happen. His blood ran cold. I need to go. Now. Marcus burst out of the Innocence Project office, frantically dialing his mother's number. The call went straight to voicemail. His mother worked as a nurse's aide at Mercy Hospital, 20 minutes across town by car. She drove a 1998 Toyota Corolla that should have been retired years ago, held together by prayer and determination. "Marcus," Alyssa called, jogging to catch up with him. "Where are you going?" "My mom, I can't reach her." The text, about her brakes. Understanding flashed across Alyssa's face. "My car's in the garage. Come on." They raced to her car, Marcus already dialing the hospital. "Mercy Hospital. How may I direct your call?" "Letitia Johnson, nurse's aide." "In geriatrics. It's an emergency." "I'm sorry, Letitia hasn't checked in for her shift yet. She's about 20 minutes late, which isn't like her." Marcus's stomach dropped. She's never late. They were halfway down Oakwood when they saw it. Flashing lights, an ambulance, a small crowd gathered around a crumpled Toyota wrapped around a telephone pole. "No," Marcus whispered. "No, no, no." Alyssa double-parked, and Marcus was out of the car before it fully stopped, running toward the wreckage. Through the shattered window, he could see the driver's seat was empty. Then he spotted her on a stretcher, paramedics working over her as they loaded her into the ambulance. "That's my mother," he yelled, pushing through onlookers. "Letitia Johnson." "I'm her son." The paramedics let him through. "She's alive," one said quickly, seeing the terror on his face. "Conscious and stable. Looks like a broken arm, possible concussion, but she was wearing her seatbelt. That saved her life." Marcus climbed into the ambulance, gripping his mother's uninjured hand. Her face was scraped from the airbag, a gash on her forehead trickling blood, but her eyes were open, focusing on him with relief. "Marcus," she whispered. "The brakes, they just went out. I pumped and pumped, but nothing happened." "I know, Mama. I know. It's going to be okay now." He looked back at Alyssa, who stood beside the police, already on her phone. Her face was set in grim determination as she spoke rapid fire to someone on the other end. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The courthouse the next morning was a different world from Marcus's previous visits. News vans lined the street, reporters clustering at the entrance with microphones and cameras. Uniformed officers stood guard at the doors, checking IDs against an approved list. The Johnson family had arrived under police escort, a precaution insisted upon by the Innocence Project after the brake tampering. Marcus's father had wanted his wife to stay in the hospital, but Letitia Johnson had refused. "I'm not missing my son save my other son," she'd declared, arm in a cast and face still bruised but eyes blazing with determination. Inside, the largest courtroom was filled to capacity. The community had turned out in force, joined now by civil rights activists, law students, and curious citizens drawn by the David versus Goliath story playing out in real time. News of the brake tampering had leaked, adding another layer of drama to the proceedings. Marcus sat beside Alyssa at the defense table, his notes arranged precisely before him. Across the aisle, the district attorney himself had appeared, a political move designed to show the state was taking the case seriously. Behind him sat Judge Crane, not in robes, but in an expensive suit, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear. Crane caught Marcus looking and gave him a cold smile that never reached his eyes. A silent message. "This isn't over." At exactly 10 a.m., the bailiff called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Elena Rodriguez." Judge Rodriguez was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, her black hair streaked with distinguished silver, her robes perfectly pressed. She surveyed the packed courtroom with an appraising eye. "Be seated," she said, her voice carrying without needing to be raised. "Let me make something clear from the outset. This is not a media circus, not a public referendum, and not a platform for grandstanding. This is a court of law examining whether a man was wrongfully convicted. Are we understood?" Murmurs of assent filled the room. Alyssa rose, buttoning her suit jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. The defense submits that Devon Johnson's conviction should be overturned on 3 grounds: newly discovered evidence, ineffective assistance of counsel, and prosecutorial misconduct." She methodically laid out the same evidence Marcus had presented: the time discrepancies, the changing witness statements, the security footage. The district attorney objected several times, but Judge Rodriguez overruled him each time, her expression growing more troubled as the evidence mounted. When Alyssa finished, the district attorney rose. "Your Honor, while these time discrepancies are concerning, they don't definitively prove the defendant's innocence. The eyewitness identification was contaminated," Judge Rodriguez interrupted. "The witness changed his description after seeing the defendant in custody. That's Identification 101, Counselor. And you haven't addressed the security footage which places Mr. Johnson at his workplace during the robbery. We'd like to have our experts examine that footage for tampering." "You've had that footage for 48 hours, Judge Rodriguez noted, glancing at her watch. "If your office hasn't authenticated it by now, that's on you. Has your team found any evidence of tampering?" The DA hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but then I'm inclined to accept its authenticity, particularly given Mr. Wilson's sworn affidavit and the digital forensics report provided by Dr. Richards." Judge Rodriguez leaned forward, pinning the DA with her gaze. "Let me be frank, Counselor. What I'm seeing here is a rush to judgment followed by a failure to investigate exculpatory evidence. Would you care to explain why your office ignored the time discrepancies that a 17-year-old managed to uncover?" The courtroom went silent. The DA cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we relied on the detective's reports, which were incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst," Judge Rodriguez finished for him. "I'm not impressed, Counselor. Not impressed at all." She shuffled through the papers before her, then looked up. "Based on the evidence presented, I am overturning the conviction of Devon Johnson. The prosecution's case is fatally undermined by the new evidence, particularly the authenticated security footage placing Mr. Johnson at his workplace during the robbery." A gasp rippled through the gallery, followed by muffled cheers quickly silenced by the bailiff. "Furthermore," Judge Rodriguez continued, "I am ordering Mr. Johnson's immediate release from custody. And while it falls outside my direct authority, I strongly recommend that the Judicial Ethics Committee examine Judge Crane's handling of this and similar cases." The pattern of disparate sentencing highlighted in the Innocence Project's brief warrants immediate scrutiny. Judge Crane stood abruptly, his attorney tugging at his sleeve. "This is outrageous. You can't—" "Bailiff," Judge Rodriguez said calmly, not even looking at Crane. "Please remove that person from my courtroom." As the bailiff approached, Crane's face contorted with rage. "You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I built this system. Me!" The outburst was caught by every camera in E. The room as 2 bailiffs escorted the struggling judge from the courtroom. Marcus watched, a complex mix of emotions washing over him: satisfaction, relief, and the sobering realization that Crane's mask had finally slipped, revealing the raw prejudice beneath. Judge Rodriguez banged her gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." 3. Hours later, Devon Johnson walked out of Eastridge Prison, blinking in the bright afternoon sunlight. When he spotted his family waiting at the gate, his face broke into the familiar wide smile that had been missing from the Johnson household. "Devon!" Marcus shouted, breaking away from the group and sprinting toward his brother. Devon caught him in a fierce one-armed hug, lifting the smaller teen off his feet. "Little man," Devon said, voice rough with emotion. "They told me what you did," said my little brother turned into Perry Mason overnight. Their parents joined the embrace. Their mother's cast-encased arm awkwardly worked into the family huddle. For a moment, they stood together, a fortress of love and resilience against a world that had tried to tear them apart. "How'd you do it?" Devon asked as they finally broke apart, walking toward the waiting cars. "For real, Marcus. You're 17. How'd you take down a whole courtroom?" Marcus shrugged, suddenly shy about his accomplishment. "I just read a lot of books," Devon laughed, throwing his arm around his brother's shoulders. "Books. Man, if I'd known reading could get you out of prison, I'd have hit the library years ago." As they headed to the cars, news broke across their phones. Judge Walter Crane had been arrested by FBI agents on federal charges for witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Alyssa joined them, her phone in hand. "They've been building a case against him for months, apparently. Your brother's case was the tipping point." "They knew?" Marcus asked, indignation rising. "They knew he was corrupt and let him keep sentencing people?" "Justice moves slowly, especially against its own," Alyssa said grimly. "But it does move." Devon squeezed Marcus's shoulder. "And sometimes it needs a push from someone who doesn't know they're not supposed to win." 3 months later, the Johnson family gathered around their television, watching the national news with a mixture of awe and vindication. In a stunning development that has rocked the legal community, the anchor reported, former Judge Walter Crane today pleaded guilty to federal charges of civil rights violations and witness intimidation. The plea deal comes after an investigation revealed Crane had sentenced black defendants to terms averaging 65% longer than white defendants for identical crimes over his 23-year career on the bench. The screen showed Crane being led from the courthouse, his arrogance replaced by the hollow-eyed stare of a man facing his own reckoning. As part of the plea, Crane will serve 7 years in federal prison and cooperate with ongoing investigations into judicial misconduct across the state. Meanwhile, the review of cases adjudicated in his court continues, with 37 convictions already overturned and dozens more under scrutiny. The camera cut to Marcus outside the federal courthouse, wearing a new suit that actually fit, looking poised and professional as microphones clustered around him. "This isn't about one corrupt judge," Screen Marcus said. "This is about a system that allowed him to operate unchecked for decades. Every case he touched is tainted. Every life he ruined deserves justice." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Alyssa. "State Bar Association just announced an ethics investigation into the DA's office. Dominoes keep falling. You started this. Remember that." On screen, the anchor continued. "The Johnson effect, as it's being called, has sparked nationwide examination of sentencing disparities. Legal observers say this case may become a watershed moment in the ongoing fight for equal justice." Devon nudged his brother. "The Johnson effect. You're practically a superhero." Marcus laughed, but his mind was already racing ahead to the cases waiting on his desk at the Equal Justice Initiative, where he'd accepted an internship. There were more Judge Cranes out there, more brothers and sisters serving unjust sentences. More fights to win. The thrift store suit hung in his closet now, retired but preserved, a reminder of where he'd started and how far he'd come. That suit had witnessed Crane's mocking laugh in the courtroom, a sound that had once carved itself into Marcus's memory. But these days, when he thought of that laugh, It no longer burned with humiliation. Instead, it fueled him. A reminder that arrogance was often power's greatest weakness, and that justice, though slow, could be hastened by those brave enough to demand it. "I'm proud of you," Devon said quietly. "Not just for getting me out, for not letting them break you." Marcus nodded, thinking of all the moments he could have given up. When Crane threatened him in chambers, when the clerk dismissed him, when his mother's car was sabotaged. Each time he'd found the strength to continue. "They never stood a chance," he replied with a small smile. "Not against Johnson." This story of Marcus Johnson reveals how brilliance can emerge from the margins. A black teen's photographic memory and determination toppling a corrupt judge when no one else would fight. His journey shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. Every mockery, every dismissal, only fuels his resolve. The tale warns of the fragility of justice in a system stacked against the powerless, exposing how racism isn't just personal prejudice, but an institutional machine grinding lives for profit. Yet it also offers hope that one person armed with knowledge and conviction can begin to bend that system toward true justice. What would you risk to expose truth like Marcus did? Comment below with a 1 if you think more teens should learn their legal rights, or a 2 if you believe the system is too corrupt to change. Like and subscribe if this tale of courage against injustice struck a chord.